It was an ordinary Tuesday evening in Cleveland when the unexpected happened. I was coming home after a long day at the logistics company where I worked, exhausted but looking forward to a quiet night with Jessica. The drive home was routine. Familiar streets bathed in the warm glow of streetlights. Yet something in the air hinted that nothing would be the same. As soon as I stepped into our modest home, I sensed a subtle tension that I couldn't quite place. I tossed my keys into the bowl by the door and headed for the living room. The soft hum of the television filled the silence, and I sank into my favorite chair. That's when my phone vibrated, an unfamiliar notification lighting up the screen. The message itself was cryptic, a short alert with a link and a string of numbers I didn't recognize. My instincts told me to ignore it, but the nagging feeling of foreboding wouldn't let me dismiss it. I hesitated, then tapped the notification. The screen flashed with a series of images and brief messages that made little sense at first glance. There were references to virtual reality sessions, encrypted crypto transactions, and usernames that felt like code names from a spy thriller. One handle, Victor X, appeared repeatedly, and I couldn't help but wonder who that might be. I almost closed the link, but something compelled me to dig deeper into this digital rabbit hole. Over the next few days, oddities began to accumulate. Jessica, usually punctual and predictable in her routines, started returning home later than usual. Our evenings together, once filled with comfortable conversation, now carried an air of awkward brevity. I noticed her phone was always within reach. Its screen locked behind a new password she insisted was for privacy reasons. Simple coincidences that, taken separately, might have been ignored, but now they formed a pattern that I couldn't overlook. Curiosity drove me to examine our shared home computer when Jessica was out. I discovered an unusual browsing history: visits to obscure VR websites, forums discussing crypto tokens, and encrypted chat rooms where usernames like Samantha_Lux and Ethan_Rising cropped up. There were no overt messages of infidelity, no declarations of betrayal, just digital footprints that suggested a side of Jessica I had never known existed. It wasn't about feelings or deep introspection. I wasn't looking for a psychological explanation, only the cold, hard facts that these digital trails provided. I decided to keep my findings to myself for a while, gathering more evidence before drawing any conclusions. I set up a secure folder on my computer and began downloading snapshots of online transactions and chat logs. Each file was a piece of a puzzle that, when assembled, hinted at a secret world of virtual intimacy. Jessica's newfound interest in virtual reality wasn't the innocent curiosity of a hobbyist. Instead, it pointed toward an organized network of digital encounters, a world where reality blurred with the synthetic and human connection was mediated by technology. One night, as I sat in the quiet of our living room, I recalled the names I'd encountered: Victor X, Samantha_Lux, Ethan_Rising, and others whose identities were hidden behind pseudonyms like Marcus_VR and Liam Crypto. They were not random. They were part of a system, a network where trust was bought and sold in the form of crypto tokens and exclusive access to private VR shows. My investigation revealed that Jessica was more than a passive participant. She was an active client, scheduling sessions, purchasing tokens, and even interacting with avatars that carried an allure of mystery and seduction. The evidence was subtle yet undeniable. Late evenings that were once devoted to watching old movies or reading beside the fireplace were now spent in virtual realms where Jessica's real self was replaced by carefully crafted digital personas. The messages she exchanged were brief and devoid of the passionate rants one might expect. They were clinical, efficient, as if she were negotiating a business deal rather than engaging in a secret rendezvous. This wasn't a crime of the heart. It was a calculated venture into a new frontier of digital pleasure. I recalled the day when I first noticed the change. Jessica had come home with an unusual glint in her eye, dismissing my casual question about her day with a vague comment about upgrading our home network. I had shrugged it off then, but now the upgrades seemed less about technology and more about unlocking doors to hidden virtual corridors. Every time I glanced at her, there was a spark that hadn't been there before. A spark that was not fueled by our shared past but by something entirely unknown. Determined to understand the scope of what I was uncovering, I reached out to an old friend from college, Tyler, who now worked in cybersecurity. Over coffee at a local diner, I explained the fragments of evidence I had gathered without revealing too much about my personal turmoil. Tyler's eyes narrowed as he listened, and he leaned in closer. "Michael, it looks like Jessica is deep in a world that's as much about tech as it is about seduction," he said. His tone was matter-of-fact, almost clinical. "These aren't the ramblings of a discontented spouse. They're the digital signatures of an organized network. And the names you've mentioned, they're not random." Tyler's words confirmed what I feared. This was no casual dalliance or fleeting experiment. Jessica had embedded herself in a community that used virtual reality as a playground for secret desires, and she was doing it with a level of precision that left little room for error. I listened as he explained how crypto tokens functioned as digital currency in these exclusive circles, enabling access to private shows and personalized encounters. It was a modern kind of barter, a trade of intimacy for anonymity. That conversation marked a turning point in my investigation. I began to map out the connections, noting the times and dates of online transactions, the frequency of late returns, and the patterns in her online activity. Every piece of data was a clue, every log entry a testament to the life Jessica was leading behind the veneer of our ordinary marriage. I wasn't seeking emotional catharsis or psychological analysis. I was building a case, one fact at a time. Despite the unsettling nature of the evidence, I remained outwardly composed. I continued my daily routine at work, interacting with colleagues and maintaining the image of a man who had everything under control. At home, I acted normally, all the while recording every detail in a private journal that only I would ever read. The duality of living with a secret was ironic in its precision. By day, a diligent husband. By night, a detective in a digital maze. As I pieced together the mosaic of clues, I couldn't help but notice the irony. In a world where everything was documented in binary code and every transaction left a trace, trust had become a currency more volatile than the crypto tokens that Jessica so eagerly exchanged. The truth was coming to light in a slow, methodical way, and I was determined to see it through. I vowed not to let emotions cloud my judgment. This was a matter of fact and consequence. A betrayal mapped out in data and sealed with cryptographic keys. By the end of that week, I had compiled enough evidence to outline the contours of Jessica's secret life. Yet I deliberately held back the full picture. The final revelation would have to come later, in a moment when every player in this intricate network would be exposed, and every digital transaction would serve as a testament to the calculated betrayal that had been unfolding behind my very eyes. As the night deepened and I sat alone in the dim glow of my computer screen, I realized that this was only the beginning. There were more layers to peel back, more names to connect, and a hidden world that had only just begun to reveal itself. In that silent vigil, with the hum of the hard drive as my only companion, I steeled myself for the journey ahead. A journey that would lead me deep into the heart of a digital labyrinth where every secret had its price, and every betrayal its consequence. The truth was out there, encrypted in lines of code and sealed behind virtual masks. And as I prepared to delve deeper into this dangerous new frontier, one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days following that fateful notification blurred together as I immersed myself in an investigation that stretched far beyond our living room and into the hidden corners of cyberspace. Every evening, after Jessica had bid me good night with a smile that now felt rehearsed, I retreated into my study, determined to follow the digital trail she'd unknowingly left behind. The murmur of our old desktop's fan and the steady tap of my keyboard became the soundtrack to my new reality. A labyrinth of data, cryptic transactions, and digital encounters. I began by meticulously reviewing the browser history on our shared computer, piecing together fragments of evidence. Websites I had never heard of, sites discussing virtual reality fantasies, crypto token exchanges, and exclusive digital rendezvous, surfaced repeatedly. Each click painted a broader picture of a world that Jessica had secretly entered. There was a curious blend of business-like efficiency and seductive allure in the transactions. Every payment she made was recorded in a crypto ledger, as precise as any bank statement, each entry linking her to a name that felt more like an alias than a person. One evening, after another long day at work, I sat in front of my computer, the glow of the screen illuminating a series of perplexing patterns. Among the numerous usernames, one in particular, Samantha_Lux, began to stand out. I recalled that name from an encrypted chat log that hinted at private VR sessions, a service that provided intimate digital experiences through a secure platform. Intrigued, I dug deeper into the blockchain records associated with that name. The transactions were consistent and regular, a modern-day ledger of a clandestine operation. They were timestamped with the precision of a Swiss watch, and each entry correlated with the late hours when Jessica was absent from home. Not long after, another name emerged from the digital haze, Ethan_Rising. His account had facilitated several transactions that were almost too neatly wrapped in anonymity. According to the fragmented chat logs I managed to capture, Ethan appeared to be the middleman, a facilitator who connected clients with the world of immersive VR shows. His language was professional, stripped of any emotional weight, as if he were discussing the logistics of a shipment rather than orchestrating virtual trysts. It was unsettling to realize that my wife was a regular client in this digital underground where currency wasn't measured in dollars but in crypto tokens and fleeting moments of simulated intimacy. Determined to connect the dots, I began to map out the timeline of these transactions. Each payment, each login time, every seemingly insignificant detail was logged into a digital spreadsheet. As I organized the information, I noticed a clear pattern. The transactions often coincided with Jessica's unexplained absences. There was little room for doubt this was not a case of a harmless hobby. It was a systematic engagement in a world where desire was commodified and loyalty was exchanged for digital pleasure. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that Jessica was not alone in this endeavor. Several recurring names began to appear, each tied to a specific role within this network. Victor X was one such name, a moniker that appeared in multiple encrypted messages and login records. His presence was enigmatic, his digital persona shrouded in mystery. Unlike the others, Victor X exuded a dangerous charm, one that hinted at a power dynamic I couldn't quite comprehend. His messages were laced with double entendres and subtle threats, a reminder that in this digital playground, everyone played by their own rules. Then there was Marcus_VR, a name that surfaced sporadically yet with an undeniable impact. His interactions were less frequent, but every time he appeared there was a weight to his words, a reminder that even in the ephemeral world of virtual reality, some players left a lasting impression. And finally, Liam Crypto made a fleeting appearance. His digital trail was intermittent and elusive, as if he were deliberately avoiding detection. But the gaps in his activity only heightened my suspicion. His sporadic involvement suggested a role more complex than that of a mere bystander. With my evidence meticulously compiled, I knew the next logical step was to see these personas in action. I created a new account on one of the secure VR platforms, deliberately using a pseudonym to avoid detection. Logging in felt like stepping into an entirely different dimension, a digital nightclub filled with avatars, flashing neon lights, and an undercurrent of whispered secrets. The platform was sleek and modern, yet it had the unmistakable aura of something illicit, like a hidden speakeasy in the virtual world. I navigated through digital corridors that pulsed with hypnotic music and vivid imagery, searching for any sign of Jessica's presence. It wasn't long before I encountered a group of avatars engaged in a conversation that seemed to revolve around an upcoming private session. The avatars introduced themselves with names that were oddly familiar: Samantha_Lux, Ethan_Rising, Victor X. I positioned myself at a distance, listening in as the conversation unfolded like a covert conference call. "Session at 11 tonight," one avatar announced in a measured tone, followed by murmurs of approval. Another replied, "I'll have the tokens ready." The language was precise, businesslike, and devoid of any emotional warmth. It was a transaction, a prearranged meeting in a realm where nothing was truly real but everything was meticulously documented. The experience was chilling, a cold, calculated arrangement made over digital channels that left no room for sentimentality. I took screenshots of key moments, preserving every digital footprint as evidence. Every transaction, every snippet of dialogue was a clue, a piece of the intricate puzzle that was Jessica's double life. Yet, despite the overwhelming evidence, a part of me hesitated. I wasn't driven by a need to emotionally confront her, nor was I preparing for an outburst of pent-up feelings. This was an investigation, a methodical pursuit of the truth, devoid of personal bitterness, though the betrayal stung all the same. Days turned into nights, and I found myself lost in the maze of VR rooms and encrypted chats. I began to notice subtle shifts in the tone of the conversations. The digital avatars, while efficient in their transactions, sometimes let slip hints of human vulnerability, brief moments when the veneer of professionalism cracked, revealing the raw humanity beneath. I wondered if any of them, like Jessica, were grappling with the consequences of their digital escapades. But I couldn't afford to be distracted by such reflections. My objective was clear: uncover every facet of this operation and expose the reality behind the carefully curated digital personas. As I navigated deeper into this labyrinth, I encountered a private chat room that required an invitation, a place where the elite of this virtual network gathered. I managed to secure an invite by leveraging a contact I had made through the platform, a minor character whose name I soon learned was just another cog in the vast machine. In that secluded chat room, conversations were even more guarded, and the stakes, as hinted by the cryptic language, were significantly higher. Names were mentioned with caution, and threats, though subtle, lurked beneath every line of dialogue. It was here that I first sensed the undercurrent of retribution, a silent promise that every action in this digital domain had its consequences. Even as I absorbed the details, the looming question remained: how far would Jessica go in this digital double life, and more importantly, how far would I be willing to go to uncover every hidden truth? There was no dramatic confrontation here, no outburst of anger, just a cold, steady pursuit of data, a search for the patterns that would eventually lead to an undeniable conclusion. By the end of this phase, I had mapped out the entire network, a web of digital interactions that spanned multiple platforms and involved at least 6 key players. Jessica's involvement was central, but each name I uncovered played a crucial role in the operation. The digital labyrinth was as intricate as it was ruthless, a testament to the new frontier where human intimacy intersected with technological precision. I saved all my findings in a secure folder, knowing that the evidence was now irrefutable. Every late-night transaction, every encrypted chat, every carefully timed login had led me to this moment, a moment where the illusion of our everyday life was shattered by the cold glow of a computer screen. The truth hidden behind layers of digital codes and VR avatars was finally coming into focus. And yet, even as I prepared to take the next step, a part of me felt a profound sense of detachment. I wasn't merely a betrayed husband, I was now a chronicler of a modern-day infidelity, an investigator in a digital age where loyalty was measured in tokens and every interaction left an indelible mark on the blockchain of trust. The labyrinth was vast and perilous, but I was determined to navigate it to its very end, even if that journey meant facing the darkest corners of a world I had never truly understood. The digital realm was unforgiving, and its inhabitants even more so. In that cold, calculated space, every secret was encrypted, every betrayal recorded in digital permanence. And as I closed my eyes that night, the relentless hum of servers and the promise of inevitable retribution echoed in my mind, a silent vow that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, would eventually be brought to light. The evidence was irrefutable, and I could no longer sit on the sidelines. My investigation had transformed into a full-blown operation, a silent war waged on digital battlegrounds where every keystroke carried the weight of betrayal. With a meticulously compiled dossier of encrypted messages, blockchain transactions, and VR login records, I prepared to confront the heart of this double life. That weekend, I decided to play my hand. I arranged a private meeting with Ethan_Rising, the elusive facilitator whose digital signature had been a recurring mark in the labyrinth of transactions. I chose a small, dimly lit bar on the outskirts of Cleveland, a place that offered privacy and anonymity. Under the hum of overhead lights and the low murmur of other patrons, I sat at a corner table, my eyes scanning the room until a man in a pressed suit approached. He introduced himself simply as Ethan, his handshake firm yet devoid of warmth. In a measured tone, he inquired if I was aware of the services his network provided. I nodded, careful not to reveal the full extent of my investigation. Over a few rounds of bitter whiskey, he explained how the digital realm had redefined intimacy. "It's all transactional," he said. "A business model where privacy is currency and desires are fulfilled in virtual spaces. Jessica is one of our premium clients." His words confirmed my suspicions without adding any extraneous emotion. It wasn't about passion or betrayal, it was a series of calculated moves in a new, technologically advanced game. I probed further, asking for details on how these sessions were arranged. Ethan outlined the protocol: clients would purchase crypto tokens, schedule sessions with digital performers, and interact with avatars that embodied a spectrum of desires. Every interaction was recorded, every payment tracked. His explanation was clinical, a litany of steps devoid of any human sentiment. I listened, absorbing every detail, mentally cross-referencing it with the evidence I had gathered. The meeting with Ethan was a turning point. His account confirmed the system's efficiency and revealed a network that spanned several operators. Beyond Ethan, names like Samantha_Lux and VictorX now emerged as critical players. But it wasn't just about these digital personas, the network had human elements too. I had learned that Jessica wasn't merely a passive participant. She was deeply engaged, orchestrating her own series of logins and transactions to feed into this clandestine world. Armed with Ethan's confirmation and the detailed timeline I'd built, I decided it was time to confront the architect of this digital deception, Jessica herself. Yet, I wasn't ready to barge in with accusations that might implode our carefully constructed facade. Instead, I waited for the perfect moment, a time when the evidence would be undeniable and when her defenses would crumble under the weight of reality. I set the stage for the confrontation by securing one last piece of digital evidence, a high-definition video file that captured one of her private sessions. It was the final confirmation I needed, a digital confession that would leave no room for denial. I saved it in an encrypted folder, knowing that when the moment arrived, it would serve as the catalyst for the impending reckoning. That evening, as dusk melted into a starless night, I prepared for the confrontation at home. The house felt eerily silent, as if it were holding its breath. Jessica returned later than usual, her steps measured, her eyes guarded. I greeted her with a practiced calm, hiding the storm that raged within. Our dinner was a quiet affair, punctuated by long silences and half-asked questions about her upgrades and late-night schedules. I watched her closely, every gesture and every hesitation telling its own story. After dinner, while she retreated to her room, I gathered my evidence and began to craft a message, a detailed account of every encrypted chat, every digital transaction, and every suspicious login. I printed out the timeline, the screenshots, and even the video file, arranging them on the dining table like pieces of a puzzle that painted a picture of betrayal. I needed her to see the full scope of what had transpired, to understand that her secret life was not something that could be swept under the rug. The confrontation came quietly. I called her into the living room under the pretense of discussing a minor household matter. When she entered, I locked the door and sat her down. Without raising my voice or resorting to theatrics, I presented the evidence one piece at a time. I began with the encrypted chat logs, the crypto transactions, and the screenshots from the VR platform. Her eyes widened with each new revelation, her breath catching in her throat. The clinical delivery left no room for her to maneuver around the facts. "Jessica," I said, my voice steady and devoid of anger, "explain this." The room was heavy with silence as I played the video, a recording of a private VR session where her digital avatar danced behind layers of anonymity and illusion. The finality in that moment was palpable. It wasn't about the betrayal alone, it was about the systematic dismantling of a facade that had been maintained with such precision. Her face contorted into a mixture of shock and resignation. There was no dramatic outburst, no desperate plea. Just a quiet acknowledgement of the truth that had been laid bare. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the only sound the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside. The clinical nature of the confrontation stripped away the potential for emotional theatrics. It was a cold, hard reckoning, a reminder that in the digital age, evidence was both immutable and unforgiving. I pressed on, laying out the full timeline and naming the players: VictorX, Samantha_Lux, Ethan_Rising, Marcus_VR, and Liam Crypto. Each name was tied to a transaction, a login, a message. It was a comprehensive picture of a digital network that had thrived on secrecy. "This isn't a spur-of-the-moment lapse," I continued. "It's a calculated operation. And you're at the center of it." Jessica's eyes filled with unshed tears, yet her voice remained measured as she tried to explain away the evidence with vague references to experimentation and exploration. There was a hint of remorse, but it was overwhelmed by the cold reality of the situation. The conversation was devoid of the expected emotional volatility. It was a business meeting in which the stakes were her very identity, dismantled one digital file at a time. In that moment, I realized that I had transitioned from a man betrayed to a man determined to reclaim his life. The confrontation was not merely a catharsis, it was the precursor to a larger plan. As I left her there, still grappling with the undeniable truth, I knew that my next steps would be as precise as the digital trail she had left behind. The gathering storm had reached its crescendo. I wasn't just exposing the infidelity, I was preparing for a final act of calculated retribution that would shake the foundations of the network she had built. That night, as I sat alone in the quiet of our home, the weight of the confrontation settled over me. The evidence was now in my hands, and with it came a determination to dismantle the digital empire of deceit piece by piece. The storm was gathering, and with it, the promise of a final reckoning that would leave no player unscathed. My journey through the digital labyrinth was far from over. It was merely entering its most dangerous phase, where every secret would be laid bare and every betrayal repaid with precision. And so, as the city slept under a blanket of darkness, I planned my next move, each keystroke in my secure folder echoing the cold certainty of impending justice. The day of reckoning arrived with a chill in the early morning air, a cold reminder that justice, though delayed, was now inevitable. I had spent the past weeks meticulously gathering digital evidence, orchestrating secret meetings, and mapping the complex web of betrayal. Now, with every piece of proof secured and every name of the conspirators etched into my digital dossier, the final phase of my plan was set into motion. Before sunrise, I activated the final protocol. In the quiet of my study, lit only by the glow of multiple monitors, I initiated a controlled data dump. Over the past months, I had built an impenetrable archive, screenshots of encrypted chats, detailed logs of crypto transactions, and even a high-definition video of one of Jessica's private VR sessions. I compiled these files into a single, untraceable packet, one that I would soon send to every major news outlet, cybercrime unit, and digital watchdog organization across the country. I also contacted my trusted allies in the hacker community, a small, discreet team that had once assisted me on minor digital errands. Their task was to infiltrate the VR network that hosted these illicit sessions and dismantle it from the inside. With surgical precision, they began to break down the firewall defenses, disabling security protocols that had once protected the network's secrets. The digital fortress that Jessica and her accomplices had built was collapsing piece by piece. At exactly 8 a.m., the packet of evidence went live. Within minutes, headlines began to flash across online news feeds, exclusive, inside the dark world of virtual infidelity and crypto betrayal. Every name was laid bare: Jessica, the unsuspecting wife; Victor X, the enigmatic VR operator; Samantha_Lux, the high-end digital concierge; Ethan_Rising, the crypto facilitator; Marcus_VR, the occasional yet pivotal player; and Liam Crypto, whose sporadic trail now pointed to a far more sinister involvement. The exposé was clinical and ruthless, leaving no room for deniability. It wasn't just an article, it was a digital autopsy of betrayal. Jessica's world unraveled almost immediately. Her colleagues and friends, once unaware of the double life she had led, turned their eyes away in shock and revulsion. The VR network's operators scrambled to cover their tracks as law enforcement and cybercrime experts converged on their digital domain. Victor X's enigmatic presence dissolved into frantic attempts to erase his identity, and Samantha_Lux's polished veneer cracked under the weight of public scrutiny. Ethan_Rising was subpoenaed, and even the elusive Liam Crypto could no longer hide behind the anonymity of sporadic logins. I watched all of this unfold from a distance, a detached observer who had been both victim and executor. There was no cathartic release of pent-up anger. Instead, there was a cold satisfaction in knowing that every calculated move had led to this moment. The precise execution of my plan was its own reward. I had taken a system built on deception and turned it against its creators, exposing their network of digital seduction and treachery to the harsh light of public accountability. Late that afternoon, I received a call from an investigative journalist who had been following the story. "Michael, your evidence is unparalleled," he said. "We're digging deeper into this network. Authorities are already planning raids, and it seems like the digital trail you've left is the key to unlocking the entire operation." His words confirmed that my actions had far-reaching consequences beyond personal revenge. They were dismantling an underground empire. In the days that followed, the fallout was both swift and unforgiving. Jessica attempted to salvage what little remained of her shattered reputation. In private, she tried to reach out to me, her voice trembling with a mix of regret and resignation. But the conversation was brief, a quiet admission that the game had been lost, that the calculated facade of her digital double life could no longer be sustained in the face of overwhelming evidence. There was no dramatic outburst, no passionate pleas for forgiveness, just a cold, clinical acknowledgement of defeat. The other players in the network fared no better. Victor X's online persona was permanently suspended, his digital footprint scrubbed by authorities who now had access to the full spectrum of his activities. Samantha_Lux was forced into an unceremonious exit, her high-end services dismantled by regulators. Ethan_Rising's carefully orchestrated operations were halted, his accounts frozen by investigations into cyber fraud. Marcus_VR and Liam Crypto, each once key cogs in the machine, vanished into obscurity, their reputations tarnished beyond repair. Every public announcement, every police raid, Every headline reinforced the message that in today's digital age, betrayal is permanent and consequences are inescapable. The network, once a thriving underground marketplace of virtual intimacy and crypto transactions, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale, a case study in how trust can be shattered by technology, and how even the most sophisticated deceptions can be undone with enough determination and precision. I continued with my life, returning to the routine of my work at the logistics company and the normalcy of everyday interactions. Yet, beneath that veneer of calm, there remained an unyielding resolve, a quiet vigilance that I would never again allow someone else to dictate the terms of my trust. The experience had taught me that in a world where digital identities can be as fluid as water, one must always be prepared to verify the facts with cold, hard evidence. In the end, my revenge was not a chaotic explosion of emotions but a systematic dismantling of a corrupt network, a reminder that every transaction leaves a trace and every betrayal, however hidden, is eventually exposed. The digital labyrinth had been navigated with care, each move calculated to ensure that justice was not only served but was undeniable. Standing at the edge of this new reality, I realized that the true victory was not in the public humiliation of those who had wronged me but in the reclamation of my own agency. The network of deceit was in ruins, its players scattered like remnants of a forgotten code. And as I looked toward a future where trust was rebuilt on the foundations of verified truth and personal accountability, I knew that this final reckoning was not the end but a new beginning, a lesson in the power of precision, strategy, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. This was the final act of a drama written in binary code and executed with the ruthless efficiency of modern technology, a modern tale of betrayal and retribution that left no room for second chances. In the harsh light of digital exposure, every secret is destined to be revealed, and every betrayal, however artfully concealed, is bound to face its final reckoning.